I got a very special guest on the program today. It's Ian Maguire of Plant Healthcare Systems of South Florida. Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business. Welcome to another edition of the Pest Geek podcast. This is Frank Hernandez, your Pest Geek. I am so excited to introduce my next guest, Ian Maguire of Plant Healthcare Systems of South Florida. And I've known about Ian for quite a while, but I don't want to give an intro because I want him to be the one to tell you about himself and what he does and his history and how he got here into the pest control industry. Ian, welcome to the podcast.
Wow, Frank, it's a real honor to be a guest on the show. First off, I'm a huge podcast subscriber. I listen to podcasts basically all day long while I do service work, and I live with a set of earbuds in my ears, so I can kind of stay distracted while doing my service work. But it's a real honor, and I was really happy when I first found your podcast about 2 months ago, because it's very specific to South Florida, which is so unique, and yet a lot of the information that we use, that we subscribe to, sometimes is not specific to the kind of details that you're providing to your audience, like myself. And I just was really grateful to make the connection and also to receive all of the expertise and information that you've provided. Very, very, very helpful. Thank you so much.
No, I really do appreciate that, and I really do enjoy. I mean, I always said if you really want to be a pest pro, you just need to come down to South Florida and spend some time here. I think we're the pest capital of the world.
I think it really is a very unique environment where we just don't go dormant. So we have that 12-month cycle where plants in general are doing something all year round, 365 days. And so it's something that just always has to be monitored in the ornamental landscapes that we have with palms and different kinds of plants. Yeah, and it definitely is a different animal when you get from general household pest, you start dealing with plants. It's definitely a different animal. But oh yeah. Well, let me ask you this though, because you have a unique and interesting story about how you got into where you are now, and this didn't happen overnight. Tell us a little bit about you and about your background, and where you're from, what you've done, and things like that, so the audience can get to know you. Well, I'm born and raised in Homestead, Florida. I just turned 40 over the summer. So I grew up in the agricultural area and had a lot of exposure to plants, but I didn't really kind of connect with it until I got to be in my kind of early 20s, I want to say. Kind of like a lot of folks, after you have children, you kind of seem to kind of dial into your garden. I don't know exactly why, but it seems to be kind of a trend or sort of, but after my son was born and even going into that sort of period of time, I started to kind of, notice the plants and all the different kinds of, palms and the diversity of the landscapes that we had in South Florida. In college, I went to South-Dade High School in Homestead, and then I went to Miami-Dade Community College. And then I got my bachelor's degree in fine art. I have a degree in multimedia from FIU. And during that period of time, I worked for one of my professors that was involved in the Miami International Rare Fruit Council. And I used to go to his house and work in his garden. And he lived close by to my mother's house, which is where I lived. And he kind of turned me on to a lot of things that I just didn't quite see in terms of the world of plants, in particular tropical fruit. And later, as I got into FIU and was pursuing my degree, my father-in-law, who is a University of Florida tropical fruit crop specialist, Dr. Jonathan Crane, at the TREC Center in Homestead.
Uh-huh.
At the time I wasn't married to his daughter, but we'd have Sunday family dinner over the house, and I used to always let him know that if he needed a photographer or something along those lines. This is 1998, 99, so technology was much different back then. That I was available. At the time, I was working at the Art Museum at FIU. And like I said, I was working for this professor of mine as his sort of 2 or 3 day a week gardener. And so sure enough, they ended up getting a grant to develop an internet course on tropical fruit horticulture. And they had a pilot grant that would fund 2 crops, mango and banana. And they had budgeted for a digital photographer and a web designer and a project manager. And I applied for the job of digital photographer, and I got I got the job. And so for me, I was really excited because, for one, I got to work very close to my house, which the center is maybe 3 miles to the west of me, and I got to kind of carve out my niche in terms of doing pictures of plants. And so through the photography that I was doing at the time, and I was using like a 1 megapixel camera, the course that we were developing was sort of, taking its time to develop. But I was amassing a huge library of digital pictures of all the different kinds of mangoes and the banana varieties. And I had quite a really nice image library. And I started to develop my own little website, which again, it's just so much different. When we think about technology, it's almost like we have amnesia because we can't really remember what it was like 10 years ago or 15 years ago when the internet was just ridiculously slow and not as instantaneous as it is now. So at any rate, the project, we started to establish this image library. I started to email the pictures around through a website I had, and I got some real nice notoriety for it. And it kind of opened many different doors throughout the research center because the other professors needed digital photography, and I was able to kind of weave my way in and out through the labs. And in 2002, I applied for a biological scientist position. There was an opening with a professor in environmental horticulture. It was Dr. Wagner Vendrami, a wonderful person and an awesome professor in his areas of expertise. He did tissue culture. Uh-huh. And I had actually done an internship in tissue culture at the center while I was finishing my degree. So I had some background in that technique, and he had a teaching appointment. So I was a good fit to help him develop website content, class materials, and to help run his program. And I worked for him for 4 years, and then I was promoted into a multimedia position between the center and Homestead and the Davie Fort Lauderdale Research Center up that way. And I got to work with all sorts of other professors up there, including palm specialist Monica Elliott and Dr. Tim Brochette.
Yes.
And also some of the entomologists up there as well. And so, I started to really, through my photography and through my multimedia, my communication skills, I was learning a lot about plants. And also while working in a lab, learning how to propagate plants and different techniques in terms of growing plants. So I was really into it. I enjoy plant material, growing, everything that has to go with plants. In 2009, my multimedia position was kind of under the magnifying glass because of some of the budget reductions. And there was an opening in the Plant Disease Diagnostic Clinic at the Trek Center. And I had worked with Dr. Aaron Palmatier of the Diagnostic Clinic on some grant projects while in the multimedia position. And when his position became available in his program, I applied for it, and I was able to reinvent myself one more time within the University of Florida Tropical Research Center as the biological scientist for the diagnostic clinic. Now, this is really where I got the sort of the core essence of where I'm at now, because I didn't know a lot about plant diseases or the diagnostic process, and also about fungicides or insecticides or any of those kinds of things. And Dr. Palmatier really mentored me while I worked for him for about 5 years. He's a fantastic professor. also a great teacher and a great diagnostician and plant pathologist as well. During that period of time, that's when I got exposure because the clientele that was submitting samples to the diagnostic clinic included pest control operators, mostly lawn and ornamental. And I just sort of recognized the industry as something that was stabilized during sort of the downturn sort of the downturn / recovery of the economy. Like these companies were still very busy, but they weren't exactly growing, but they were stabilized, and the business models were quite firm.
Right.
So at a certain point, I started to kind of project my ideas to some of the people I worked with as to possibly going into the lawn and ornamental pest control industry. I didn't really have any takers, but at one point, I started to switch my exercise routine in the morning to a local gym, and I started running into a high school friend of mine that is a pretty well-established landscaper in Key Largo. And at a certain point, maybe 6 months into working out together, I started to tell him about my idea, and he kind of helped green light my endeavor because he offered up some of his clientele. And at that point, I needed to figure out how to get into business. And what quickly though?
Yeah, let me ask you this before. What triggered? I mean, something happened along the way that you were working there, and what kind of triggered this idea of you becoming an entrepreneur? Because most people on a track to an academics don't usually do that. And so, what triggered that?
Well, that's a very good question. Working at the University of Florida is a great place to work. As a biological scientist or as a state employee that is an assistant to a professor, you kind of hit the ceiling at a certain point, and your ability to grow your income is sort of you hit the ceiling at a certain point. You're just not going to grow beyond that. Gotcha. You have the benefit of great health insurance, which was a key for me. I had children young, and then I had a second wave of children. I had identical twins in 2008. Yeah, so my family grew from 2 to 4. And so all of a sudden, I started looking at it like, well, this is a great job, but if I'm going to be in this scenario where it's so cutthroat, where my job is all so vulnerable, and I'm working very, very hard for this. You want to basically, if you're a hard worker, you want to be in a situation where your hard work can be rewarded. And
right.
Beyond praise, the best reward, in my opinion, is cash money. And,
yeah, right.
And so, I do like to hear, hey, you did a great job, and thanks, and keep showing up and keep doing it. But at the same time, when it comes down to dollars and cents, the best kind of thank you is in a financial reward. And University of Florida just was not capable of really taking it beyond, the status quo. So gotcha. I always felt that I had the entrepreneurial spirit, but I had children young.
Right.
I needed to be in a stable situation where I could provide a good livelihood, health insurance at the time, and things that were important when you have a family. So, right. A state-funded, job is great. You get days off and vacation, and there's a lot of perks. But right. the thing is that if you're there to work hard, and everybody does, there's going to be a plateau at a certain point.
Right. Yeah. You hit a glass ceiling somewhere. Now, let me ask you this, because this is, you have children. Obviously, you have all the responsibilities of the household and, mortgages and cars and everything everybody else has. At one point, did you share this with your wife, and what did she think?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I had to kind of wait. My wife is a teacher, and so I kind of needed to wait till she was back, because we had the twins, and I needed to kind of wait till she was back into a situation that would allow me to take that jump.
Right.
She spent some time at home while the children were the twins. This last go around were old enough to go to school, and then she went back to teaching. She's a early ed teacher, and first, second, third grade, and that is at a Montessori school locally in near our home in Homestead. And so I needed to sort of strategically do this. But again, as I got it to the point where we actually had gotten this off the ground, and I partnered with someone that has a license. My partner's name is Keith Wyrick, and he's also the COPO, and he's a license holder currently in our company. We're a 50-50 company.
Right.
Keith ran the company for solely, and I helped as much as I could and took days off work and used my vacation time and sick time and things like that to work with him. But he ran the company for the first 18 months, basically, until we had enough momentum where I could come 100% out.
Right. So what happened when you were talking to this person that you were working out with? I mean, what was that like?
Basically, gave me that's a friend of mine here that I grew up with. His name is Frank Crowley. And, he really gave me the confidence to pursue. I think some people, maybe it's innate and they just move towards things. I'm a little bit more cautious, but he really gave me the confidence to complete my goal, to take my idea to fruition. And it's a collaboration. And a lot of like what I did when I was studying in college in multimedia is collaborative. And so again, I have that sort of core characteristic in terms of that I'd like the idea of working collaboratively and obviously through the momentum that you can build by working in this particular industry with landscapers and other people that are involved in the management of the landscape. That's where you start to find your balance and how you're able to move forward more quickly than usual, I think, because again, there's sort of a point person within the structure of the landscape, and as a subservice of the landscaper, you're basically, at least in my experience, you're referred,
right?
So that's how we've generated a lot of businesses, is working with landscapers and just helping them to look good.
Right.
We don't really we're not there to outshine the landscaper. We're there to help them to do a better job.
Right. And that is always, a struggle depending on where you're at, obviously.
Absolutely. Because, if you don't have a collaborative approach there, and you're not in sync with whoever is horticulturally managing the landscape, you're at a disadvantage because you're just kind of playing the finger pointing game when things go wrong. Right.
And you end up with a two-headed monster.
That's correct.
Yeah. So that's great. Now let me ask you, because you've gone through the process. You had to find someone, because you didn't have any experience in actual pest control where you can go get your license, and you had to go find a partner. How challenging was that for you? Because, I've been in partnerships before, and partnerships are a lot like marriages. If it works out, it's wonderful, but when it doesn't, it's very painful. How did you go about that process about, finding this partner? How did you end up here?
Well, kind of like when I caught fire to this, and all of a sudden I had the possibility of a clientele. I was like, wow, I've got momentum here. I can see something happening. And through the diagnostic clinic, there was a number of people that I had become close with that were submitting samples. I had a lot of interaction with clientele, and including people that worked in the pest control industry. And some of them I became sort of friends with, and I started kind of talking to them about my idea. I had a couple different people that I was trying to, put into place, but then they were kind of weary of partnership, and they had been in bad partnerships, and they didn't want to pursue that again. And then when Keith, he had been suggested to me by a friend of mine that is a nurseryman in Homestead that has the Pine Island Nursery, my friend Eric.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, why don't you talk to Keith Wyrick? And I said, well, geez, he has been submitting samples. And Keith, as I found out later on, had actually owned his own natural-based lawn care company as a sort of a supplement of a landscape nursery business that he and his family owned for many generations called Quail Roost Nursery.
Mm-hmm.
And through the sort of mid to late 90s into about the mid 2006, Keith had Natural Lawn of America, which was kind of cutting edge for its time because it was a natural-based lawn care company. And but at the time, Keith had sold his company and left town and then returned and started working again, doing some sales for the company that he had sold his Natural Lawn of America to. And he was submitting samples to the clinic, so I'd see him, not every week, but maybe every couple of weeks or so, because he lived in Homestead, and he would bring the samples down, and we would kind of shoot breeze. And I started talking to him about my idea. And I was, again, I'm very cautious. And so at the same time, as we were talking about it, I wasn't sure if he was the right one or, I just wasn't sure. I had never done this before and I'd never owned a business, but Keith had, he had been in business for himself for many years within the nursery and within Natural Lawn. And at a certain point in time, as we got closer and closer to it, he said, hey, listen, I'm going to start something with or without you. And because he was ready to move on from the company that he was working from. And at that point, the pressure was on. And so we went ahead and hired some attorneys and put a operating procedure together, including our sort of partnership agreement and our buyout and all that kind of stuff. We did all that paperwork ahead of time. And so that way we had an idea of exactly what the terms were in the event that one of the two partners, me or he, were to leave the company.
Right.
And that's important, it's just like a prenup. It's like kind of like a prenup in a marriage, and that was a key thing. And he suggested that, and we're in the process of even revising that right now, like most partners in any business might do. So anyways, like I said, we went ahead and put our vehicles together and started to kind of develop our approach. Now, he's the one that mentored me. I had no idea how to put a tank together. I knew how to spray fungicides because we did a lot of fungicide efficacy trials in the diagnostic clinic. Uh-huh. But spraying lawns and blanket spraying and this and that and doing all different kinds of things. I didn't have any idea how to do any of that and what was safe to use and what was safe not to mix. And so he, I would work with him on Saturdays and Sundays, or, I'd take a day off a week. And then eventually, as I started to transition away from the University of Florida, I had a lot of leave time. So I was able to take a month off with pay. And then I segued out completely.
Wow. Okay. So that's,
yeah.
I mean, so kind of like, it was more of a lot of people run into business not really knowing what they're running into. They run into a lot of pest control technicians in this industry will work for a company and they understand the pest control, but they don't understand the business. And they'll go in by themselves and they will just enter into these whole bunch of struggles that they weren't expecting. And you were able to, get somebody who was able to get you some business through the relationships that you had built, and then find somebody who had the experience of actually running a company that was willing to mentor you. So it was almost like, a godsend that this whole thing happened.
It's been incredible. I couldn't imagine that I would be this far along, again, without the collaborative component of the work that I'm doing. And that of course includes my direct partner, Keith, who's just been amazing, and again, the difference, Keith is in his mid-50s. I just turned 40. Right. So we have about 15 years between us, and our circles of plant people are kind of within these two sort of circles, and they kind of collide. And initially it took a little bit of time, but, we were really able to kind of catch fire pretty quick, and just with, not cutting corners on the quality of the work and also the products being used and just trying to perfect there's no perfection in this, but just trying to dial in the service, you know?
Right. Now, let me ask you, because obviously, everything looks like it, fell together for you, but I'm sure that you must have had some real struggles along the way. What have you found to be a struggle that might help somebody else in this?
Well, one of the things is certainly this is not the kind of work for someone that's necessarily out of shape. You got to look at this as being this is outdoor work. This is South Florida. It's hot, it's sticky, it's wet, it's humid, it's windy. You name it. There's every kind of environmental factor, even potential freezing weather that impacts. So you got to kind of have some mental toughness and also some physical fitness built within your within your lifestyle. When I think about the name of our company, which is Plant Healthcare, I try to associate it in many cases to human healthcare as well. And that just like in anything else, plants, like humans, love routine. And I don't want to get woo-woo, but right. I think that they know when something's coming after. You could think about it like many of the plants that are being installed in landscapes are coming from a ornamental nursery where they're highly managed so that they are marketable.
Yes.
When those plants come out of the nursery and are installed in a landscape, it changes.
Yes.
And that routine is now no longer quite the same. And so there is some change. There could be, something as extreme as a shock but there's just so many. And so it takes a period of time to balance the landscape. And sometimes that within that balancing period of finding out, well, is this working here? Or this is not working here. There's no water going here. This is, you have clients that are frustrated and you have a lot of issues where you're having to kind of ask someone to be a little patient with the balance process of a newly installed landscape.
Right. Yeah. It's that mentality that we installed it and it looked so beautiful in the nursery when we picked it out, and now look at it. and
for sure,
physiological things do happen to those plants once they're put into the ground, especially our ground.
Exactly. And so, the situation really turns into one in which, in some cases, it just won't work there. And that's where you collaborate with a landscaper to maybe have a discussion about using an alternative plant or focusing on an effort to get an irrigation specialist to route more or less water to a particular area so that you can start to see that part of the landscape balance out. Purely if the house has gutters or if it doesn't have gutters can certainly make a big difference during extreme rain events that we have, and then all of a sudden you'll see plants or lawns that become really beat up, primarily because water's dropping from 25 feet off of a high barrel tile roof, and then you're having to kind of explain to the client or explain to a landscaper that you're working underneath, that you're trying to simulate what the potential problem is, why that's not working there.
Right. Yeah, because everybody else just assumes it's an issue of, if I hired you to be a pest control technician, and I have the landscaper, this should automatically look nice.
Yeah. And you always run into the one, and every L&O guy will tell you this, is you'll have the guy standing out in his yard and he'll be pointing across the street saying, well, that guy's yard looks fantastic and he's not doing anything, and it's really just not true, because in many cases, if you walk across the street or you go next door to that lawn, you'll start to see that, well, hey, there are a lot of weeds in this lawn, or hey, it's not quite as nice as it looks from the road, and that's just the case.
Right. Yeah. There's always those issues that every property is going to be different. The drainage. There's so many things that affect what we do that are out of our control that we can't do anything about. And that sometimes seems to be the most frustrating thing. Yeah, that you're doing your best, you're trying as hard, and you still can't nail it, and you can't get to that perfection that the customer is looking for. So I've come across that constantly.
Sure.
But,
and, when working in the diagnostic clinic, one of the other professors, he was the emeritus professor in the diagnostic clinic, and he would come in frequently, and you probably know Dr. McMillan.
I have not met him. No, I don't.
Okay. Well, Bob McMillan is, he also teaches a course. I'm not sure if he's still doing it or not at Miami-Dade, and it was in plant pathology. And I sat in on that class when I first started working in the clinic. And one of the things that he always talked about, and I always kind of held this close to heart, and I know Dr. Palmatier talks about this as well, is that what does the plant supposed to look like when it's growing healthy? Or so is it supposed to be variegated, or is that a symptom of poor nutrition or disease or an insect infestation? So again, that familiarity or that knowledge of what a plant looks like when it's growing healthy is something that's very valuable,
right,
in this industry, and also having that being able to identify the plants, knowing what they are. It's helpful. It's helpful that you enjoy plants if you're doing this, because if you don't, then you're doing the wrong thing, especially if you're doing lawn and ornamental pest control. Again, you have to really kind of be into loving what you're looking at, or else you're doing the wrong thing.
No, I totally agree. A lot of the experiences I think that I've run across are a little bit different than yours, is that most of the landscapers that I deal with where I'm in Miami-Dade, don't understand plants. They understand mowing, trimming, blowing, but they don't understand the actual plant. They always have an issue where plant location is a huge issue with what we do, because they put the wrong plant in the wrong place. The irrigation is wrong. The irrigation was set up by the developer who built the development, and it wasn't considering the landscape. So a whole bunch of issues will play, and I'm talking about them of this particular plant, how it should look, and all that, and they're looking at me like, like you got a third eye.
Right, absolutely.
And I run into that constantly. So it's that trying to get that collaboration. I can see where that. I wish there was more training for readily available down here. And the extension program, I got to tell you, I mean, they've got, I know Aaron. I've gone down to the lab. I've talked to him. Every time I get a chance to go over there and talk to him, he's a wonderful person who just enjoys teaching and sharing what he knows. And it's been so helpful to me. And then they've got such great programs about,
That's right.
training
they
people.
Do a good job.
Yes, the training they have for IDing, the programs they have. If more landscapers took advantage of that, and more people took advantage of that, I think we would see such an increase in the industry.
Frank, I totally agree. And we kind of talked about this before we decided to do this podcast, and I'm kind of reflecting back to that conversation, because as you start to work in the field, and I do 95% of all my service work right now, as I'm still learning how to do this. I think it becomes more and more difficult to carve out the time to spend a half day at the extension office listening to a seminar, or to get the CEUs or whatever it might be. I mean, that's really, people, of course, attend many of these for the CEUs. And of course, the information is extremely valuable as well. But at the same time, the timing of it's very difficult to take people out of the field for training. And we do, our technicians and our helpers, we are definitely focused on having them benefit from the resources that are available to us through the University of Florida and Extension. Again, but the difficulties become carving out the time to sit there and to not be, let's say, on call for whatever it might be, or doing service work or what have you.
Yeah, I think we need to get to the. I think we're in a new age, being in the media age, and you understand this better than anybody. Being in that new media age where the focus has to start being put more to that new media, where it's put out on video, it's put out there where people can access it when they get the chance, not when it's available. And I think on-demand training is going to be probably the next step that they really need to look at to get it out there. And I'm a big proponent of that. I'm trying to get a bunch of people convinced of that.
Well, yeah, I can hear you, Frank. Coming from the multimedia world, and having sort of a second education through University of Florida, I look at it just Facebook, for example. I mean, there's over 1 billion monthly users in
Yes.
Facebook, and everybody has a Facebook account for the most part. I know some people that don't, but that is, just the Facebook notification format is
Yes.
something that is extremely valuable because it shows up right on your phone.
Yes.
And I just don't see, and this is not necessarily being critical, but I don't see the usage of that by the extension agents or the extension specialists. I don't see that, and
Right.
so the information trickles instead of comes, and so I never quite got that. And at the same time, kind of like what we talked about before, was that these extension specialists, these extension agents are inundated with a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of paperwork and things like that go beyond what we
Right.
know about. And so they're overwhelmed. And in many cases, having an active social media presence is possibly more than they want to bite off.
Right. Yeah. I know. It's definitely, if they don't have somebody dedicated to doing that, which, obviously you were, and you got, you went into into business for yourself, which, I was always a big proponent of being in business for myself. But I think we can be, this podcast and you, and as we get the word out, I think we could be, some neat partnerships could arise.
Many active issues that would be very helpful to our industry could certainly be more readily available through a resource beyond your podcast,
right?
But also at the level in which we receive from the extension agents or other resources. I think we talked about Doug Cadwell. He does a fantastic job of getting information. I use so much of his information when I need to. When I do a search, for example,
right.
I'm always happy to find one of his PDFs or see one of his videos.
Yes,
and it's a pleasure to have that resource available.
No, I definitely I'm a big fan. I'm getting ready to take the Palm class with Monica Elliott, which I've always wanted to take. Everything I've learned about palm trees, I've learned from Monica Elliott, and in the field, but it's always in writing, and unless you're a ravenous reader of technical material, you're just not going to come across it. It's this just happens to be for me that I just enjoy reading that type of material. And I'm getting ready to take the class because I know she's getting ready to retire soon and she's not going to do it. So I'm looking forward to taking that class, but I would definitely like to see that as a resource. And as we're talking about resources, what do you consider to be a valuable resource that you would recommend in like for troubleshooting issues in the landscape or the lawn? What do you use or you recommend?
Of course, I use Google a ton.
Okay.
And certainly, if I see something, I try to put in a search stream like, yellowing and sometimes it comes up with nothing, but it starts a stream and that Google searching, if you can kind of word it correctly, will, I have a client that has some wart ferns that has this strange, sort of like the tips get a little deformed. It's sort of maybe bacterial, maybe it's a bunch of, it could be so many things. And he's kind of particular about his ferns. And so this issue, so I start doing searches on wart ferns and this and that. And, wart fern distortion, snails on wart ferns, of course, would be, and trying to kind of, assimilate what it could be. So certainly Google is sort of like the first line of defense.
Okay.
And then, I would certainly, if I had an issue with something in particular, I would call. I like to have a conversation with someone that I know that has some expertise. And we have, luckily, within our company, we have Eric Schroyer, who is one of our manager technicians. And he has a tremendous amount of expertise with palms and cycads. He worked for Montgomery for 10 years, the Research Institute, and took care of their palm and cycad collection and did a lot of the care there, and also for Monkey Jungle, and also then for a large landscape company here in Homestead that did extremely high-end service work, and also did huge specimen tree move. They would move valuable palms from a collection to another collection, or for Fairchild or whatever it might be. And Eric would do all the quality assurance work. So, I have the benefit of being able to call my partner Keith, who's got a tremendous amount of expertise, the landscaper Frank that I work with, who has 20 plus years of seeing just about everything possible. And he's been a person that I've learned a lot from. So when you run into something kind of unique, like maybe a lightning strike on a fancy palm tree in a coastal landscape, and you're like, something's going on here, and you start to kind of do the detective work that may lead you to what happened and why that palm is all of a sudden dying, and you start making some calls, you take some pictures with your phone or with a camera that you may have, and you start texting it around to people, and possibly start to kind of through the detective work have an idea of what the what the root cause is, and that's really the name of the game. It's problem solving 101.
Yeah, and that's one. I don't know. Have you read the book Start With Why?
No, I have not. I'll have to check that out.
It's an excellent book because it's kind of like the way I'm wired, where I was always the kid in class that, but why, and and every time I talk to most pest control people, it tends to be, what are you using, how are you doing it, and really in ornamental landscapes, to me, what you just mentioned is probably the most vital characteristic of somebody who works in this field, that has to ask, why is this happening? Not what do I, because it's a symptom of something greater than just an insect. When you deal with a lot of general household pests, it's what, but in the landscape, it's more of why. And the person that tries to make that transition from one pest control service to another will always struggle with that, because they got to be able to trace it down a rabbit hole to find out, why this is happening. And I think that you nailed it when you start.
Yeah, I mean, here's an example. Like, just recently, this happened to me last week. Was I work with a property manager, and they had installed a landscape here in Key Largo, and they put these beautiful hibiscus around these mailboxes that the homeowner just really loved. It's one of those really showy kind of red and orange varieties of hibiscus. And they put 4 pretty good size, probably 4.5 feet tall hibiscus. And they were beautiful. And we did our, our fertilization program. We did some preventative systemic root drenching for, preventative control of mealy bug and things like that. And that was, we're on like a bi-monthly service with this account. So, I mean, I'd go by and take a look, and so the property manager had sent me a text with some pictures and said, hey, these hibiscus are kind of dropping leaves. And, we've had a tremendous amount of rainfall where we went kind of from famine to feast in the last 2 months in terms of the Keys here. And I kind of chalked it up to possibly too much water. And that the roots were possibly locked up, and that the plant was dropping leaves primarily because of that. A week goes by, and I go to the property manager says, hey, these things are looking really bad. They're dropping a ton of leaves. And I go to finally take a look at it, and I really should have gone right away and scouted. But I didn't. And when I got there and I started looking through the leaves, they were just loaded with spider mites. So this is right. So, I mean, just loaded, hundreds and hundreds of spider mites, just working their way. And so that was the cause, because, we pulled back the mulch and we dug up some of the roots, and they had beautiful white, healthy roots. And So there you go. And obviously in our world, the systemic does not really do much to control spider mites.
Right.
And so we're not going to see control with that. And a spider mite population may show up, within a short period of time. And, if they find the plant that they love, they're going to really, really work it over.
Yeah, I know. And it's one of those difficult insects to just visualize because you're not going to see a spider mite. You got to really, look for it. I mean, let me ask you this: in your pest control business, how are you leveraging the technology to gain an advantage? And maybe in this situation or in another situation.
Well, yeah. For me personally, and within the company too, but I have the advantage of coming from a very photographic background. So I look at everything in terms of like sort of creating a record. In many cases, when I start a new property, I photograph the whole property and I kind of go through and I look at things that are maybe a little chlorotic or maybe lawns that are full of weeds. And I take a bunch of pictures. I go through and I photograph it in sort of sections. But I did a lot of this kind of documentation photography has sort of been my style because of the nature of the plant-based work that I'm doing. So I kind of try to use photography not to create some stunning visual portrayal of these landscapes, but more so to kind of create a record of the things that I hope to change within the scope of the services that I'm providing. And that, as you see a weed, the weeds start to kind of come, be eliminated out of the lawn, and you see palms start to become deep green again instead of yellow. I go back and I rephotograph those things and I create a series of before and after. And I was doing a lot of this kind of stuff for the University of Florida, so I'm very efficient at photographing things, filing the photographs, and then being able to access them need be in a scenario. For example, I had a scenario where a landscaper I know had removed 3 royal palm trees, and the homeowner said, "Hey, there was only 2." And we were able to go back to photographs that I had and show that there was actually 3. So he was able to prove that there was something there that was there. And so I really look at it, and using the digital camera, and more so than ever, I've got the newest iPhone and the photography. I use mostly the Apple platform, and the iPhone has been very, very useful, just as a device that's always on you, not only for listening to Pest Geek podcast, but also for creating records of property. And the one thing that's different about the camera phone on your smartphone, it gets a little jumbled, because you'll have like your kids' gymnastics contest, and then you'll have a series of pictures of some guy's landscape. And it's so funny because so many of the landscapers I work with, or the other pests, you look through their phones and it's just all plant stuff, and it's really funny because we're into it, and so we're looking at things, but I really feel that my ability to create a photographic record of a property, and not only a photographic record, but a continuing record. So, I kind of map out spots where I'm going to photograph things, and I'm going to come back to those spots so that I can create a before and after at some point that gives some kind of visual proof that my methods are effective.
Yeah. Yeah, because like I said, the differences between the two type of pest control is very, one is about aesthetics and how things look, and the other one is we don't see a roach, and it's totally different. So you have to be able to go, because people do forget, quickly how bad their landscape looked before you took it over, and they're thinking, oh, well, he's not really done a whole lot sometimes. And I think to be able to document that's pretty neat. I do a lot of that. I have situations where it's come in very, very handy. And, in so many cases, the homeowner, whether or not they're seasonal homeowners and they're there for 6 months out of the year, or they live there, that's their primary residence, they may or may not see things, or they may or may not have an idea of
why something died. I mean, here's another example. I have a property that has a big Italian cypress on it, and it's not one of those it's not one of those vertical ones. It's more of I'm not sure the name of which variety it is, but there's no gutters on the house, and this thing just gets pounded by rainfall from about 20 feet up. And, you know, when I started working on the property, the Italian cypress was, you know, kind of stressed as it was. And with this last kind of round of heavy rainfall that we had here in the Keys, it just went downhill. And I was able to kind of correlate that and send some pictures to the client who's not currently there to kind of give them a little bit of advance notice based on, you know, the issues that we're having.
Yeah, I think that's vitally important, that kind of feedback. And and you get that with your type of service where you're offering a really nice high end, really personalized service versus somebody who might have a company who's just strictly a quarterly spray service and they just come in, spray everything down, and then leave. And I think that has a lot to do with the value that you provide for that client to understand that, you know, hey, I'm looking out for you. I'm not just coming here and we sprayed it and these are issues that we need to address, and it takes time, and you have to invest time in those clients. But it's what I think differentiates you probably from the rest of, you know, what might be available in the marketplace. And I think that's vitally important to be, because I talk always about finding that unique, you know, what's your unique service proposition that you're offering the client, and why should you, and being able to justify higher prices and things. And I think those are the things that really makes a difference for the client.
Absolutely. It sure does.
Yeah.
I mean, really the quarterly service, I mean, a lot of these products that we use, the residual's just not that, it's not 90 days.
Right.
And the thing is that, really where it's at is the monthly service, minimally, you know, I kind of explain it as a friendship. And if I have a friendship and I see you every month, we're good friends. Right. If I see you every other month, it's like an acquaintance. And if I see you every 3 months, I don't really know you at all. Yeah. It's you know, so that's really the way I try to market the monthly service. And really, if you really need to, again, put the landscape into balance, there's no other way to do it than monthly service.
Right. Yeah, other than you being like a superintendent, being there every day, which, you know, that's a lot of people do, which is just, you know, the golf, you know, people wonder how that golf, you know, looks so great and everything else does is that, well, they got a guy on there every day walking that property, making sure that everything is done. And I think that's great. I know you've run into it where you have a specific problem and you ran into zoysia. And you found mealybugs, and I would have never thought of finding mealybug. And explain to us, you know, how that happened and what's going on with that, and so we can try to help some people who are dealing with zoysia maybe to be able to nail this.
Well, zoysia lawn is, of course, it sort of goes along with sort of the high-end landscape. So many people have sort of transitioned away from the St. Augustine and have started to use, in particular, a variety of zoysia called Empire. And the beauty of Empire is you can cut it with a rotary mower, and you don't have to use a real mower like with some of the other older varieties of zoysia, like diamond zoysia, cashmere zoysia. And so, again, you know, folks that, you know, really a big part of lawn care or of lawn and ornamental is that people want their grass to look nice. You know, essentially, when you think about it, grass is really there as a sort of a buffer to hold your landscape in place, you know, so that it doesn't all wash away. But at the same time, you know, the thing is that when you get into these high-end scenarios, you know, people have seen these wonderful lawns that are fantastic to walk on. They're deep green. And so as we got started, we started working on a lot of different kinds of zoysia lawns, ranging from, again, the different varieties. But the primary preferred variety is Empire. And in 2000, I guess probably 2013, 14, 15 now, we started seeing a weird thing in the lawn, and it was after the sort of the drought period of the summer, and the lawns would start to be recovering from the dry spells that we'd have in May, June, and July.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as they'd start to kind of thicken back up and everything would start to become healthy again, you'd get these sort of weird gray flat spots in the lawn. And it looked a lot like armyworm or grubs or sod webworm, something it just would not hook, and you treat it with, the products that are effective for worms, and it wouldn't get better. And then eventually you'd have sedge grow into these spots, and it was just a kind of a real mission. And in this one particular lawn here in Key Largo, we were doing a lot of work trying to figure out what this was. And I remember just being down on my hands and knees and peeling apart these blades, down into the stolon, and there was this white excrement in there, and I was like, wait, a lot of, first you start to think, oh, this is fungus, and then as you start to peel it apart a little bit more, and you're looking very, very closely, and this is getting down on your hands and knees and spending, a lot of time looking very, very closely, I started to see these little pink dots, and I was like, wow, it looks like mealybug. And sure enough, I went onto my phone and I typed in mealybug in zoysia lawn. And sure enough, there is a number of reports that talk about this rice mealybug, tuttle mealybug, or just purely, if you wanted to read up on it, you type in zoysia mealybug. And it's specific to zoysia, and it tends to kind of show up in when the grass has been stressed by drought. And so you figure, when we're not getting a lot of rain and we're super, super hot, you start to see these things come on. And then as we start to get the rain, then all of a sudden the grass gets healthy, but then it gets sick again. And it's the mealybug that's in the grass.
Mm.
And so it's been, as far as I know, I haven't spoken to one of the consultants that I know that works in West Palm, but as I understand, West Palm has had some serious, serious problems with zoysia mealybug to the point where they're ready to start using a different zoysia type lawn, like replacing lawns, because it's an expensive problem to treat, because the control products that we use have to be more systemic in nature, and because the mealybug is so tight in the stolon and down in deep in the parts of the of the zoysia grass, the empire zoysia grass, that you just cannot get any of the control products that would control mealybug as a contact kill down in there.
Gotcha.
And so, and then it's a double whammy too, because zoysia lawns tend to be cut at least on a weekly or 10-day interval.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is during the summer, the lawns are being cut so frequently that the systemic nature of the products that are being used that are allowable for residential lawns just doesn't stay in the actual system of the zoysia grass, in the stolon, in the roots, and up into the tissue,
right,
because it's being cut all the time. What tends to happen as we get into the winter months and the grass is cut less frequently, the systemic products tend to have enough time there in the tissue to wipe the mealybug out. And that's been the trend in which we see. So we'll see mealybug really, really bad in the zoysia lawn through late July and August, September, October. And then as we get into November, December, as we get into the short day cycle, the cooler temperatures, the lawn's not growing quite as quickly, it's not being cut as frequently, we'll start to see the products take effect and the zoysia mealybug become less of a pest in the empire zoysia lawn.
Gotcha. So the idea is to keep an eye on it early in that hot time of the year when we're not getting a ton of rain. And so we're looking at June, July is when you're seeing most of the damage occur?
Well, sort of.
Okay.
I think this year, I think we started seeing mealybug. I saw it first in it's a zoysia lawn that I take care of in Pinecrest, Florida. And it's about 18,000 square feet of Empire zoysia. So a great target for everything. You know, so a great indicator for what potentially can be happening, because it's just a huge target. Just another note on potentially how Empire, how this mealybug is spreading through zoysia is that I can't confirm this, but my hunch is that equipment, of course, is going to carry some of the infected material or infested material from property to property, and there's just a social scenario with how, you know, lawns like this are being cut and they're going from one to another, and there's no sanitation. It would be very difficult to do it. You know, so there's going to be eggs, there's going to be pieces of tissue that are going to have mealybug on it, that are going to be either on the blades or on the catchers or whatever it might be, and it's going to spread socially by equipment during the peak time.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's part of, I think everything, I don't think I find anything down here that eventually doesn't get something. And it's just been like, oh, this great lawn, it's resistant against a lot of things. And, oh no, wait, we found mealybug. I think that's always the case. So
I mean, it's really something where as you start to see these flat spots in the lawn, and then you'll start to see sedge growing up into these sections. And what's happened is the mealybug has been, it looks almost like as if a weed eater just, you know, hit that section, because it's like a flat spot.
Right. And
it's kind of gray. And if you get down and you start to peel it apart, you'll see the white mealybug, you know, excrement, and then you'll see these little. I mean, Lawn and Landscape magazine did a piece on it in I think May of this year.
Okay.
I mean, a small piece.
Right.
A small piece on it. I don't think it was like a feature part of their magazine, but it was discussed.
Right.
And Lyle Buss, who's the entomologist for University of Florida, does have publications on this issue. And you know, it's just, you know, the frustrating thing about this is that it's a huge problem, and it really needs to be. At least if you're dealing with zoysia lawns, it really needs to be talked about a little bit more in terms of like what is the future of Empire zoysia because of this particular issue.
Yeah, I think what we're going to do is we're going to hunt down the entomological data that we can find, and we'll just feature it on the podcast and at least help get the word out that way.
I would be very interested in you know, the approach is that you're going to have to go systemic.
Right.
But at the same time, the systemic is not going to be there for very long.
Right. Yeah.
So and then if you did something systemic granular, it's still a very difficult pest to control.
Yeah. No. And then we have the issue where systemics are under the microscope right now. So
of course,
promoting an increased use of systemic is not going to be really popular.
Yeah, and that, I mean, certainly, I mean, a lawn, you know, absolutely, and I feel the same way. I mean, if you could knock it out with oil and soap, that would be an interesting trial. At this point, it's not something I can spend the time doing an experiment on with you know, I've got to kind of knock it out and kind of stay on top of it.
Yeah.
So I have to take kind of the harder approach rather than the softer approach.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I would be very curious, you know, what kind of research has been done on this, because it's an extremely popular lawn. I'm looking at it being installed all over the place, and I just don't see this problem going away anytime soon.
Wow. Let's we're going to definitely keep an eye on it, because these are the things that obviously affect you and me on a daily basis, and I think we're going to have to. Yeah, I started seeing some customers who wanted to go to zoysia. The problem is they didn't know how to manage it, and their landscaper was managing it the same way they managed their St. Augustine, and they had a ton of problems, and they eventually just gave up and went back to St. Augustine, because, you know, they were able to get, you know, obviously the landscaper knew what he was doing with that. So I think it's becoming more popular. I'm hearing a lot more about it. I personally have not had the experience to have to treat a whole lot of it. So I'm going to have to get my research going because this is obviously going to be impacting South Florida. But can you believe it? It's been an hour. I mean, we've been chatting here for an hour. It's been a blast, man. I really do appreciate this, you spending the time. And just in case, I mean, there's maybe a landscaper out there. Maybe there's a company that down in the Keys that wants to hire you or get some information from you. How can they get a hold of Plant Healthcare Systems of South Florida?
Well, I mean, we do have a website, and certainly they can start with taking a look at what we have online. That's planthealthcaresystems.com, and you can do a Google search and it'll come up.
Yeah.
But at the same time, our presence is starting to be felt, and the word of our quality of work is spreading and nicely, organically, and again. That's one of the challenges. You don't want to grow too fast in this world because then you can't keep up.
Yeah, definitely. Well, great. And then, so what I'm going to do is I'll definitely put a link to your site so people can actually link to you from here and check you guys out. And man, let's just keep in touch, and hopefully we'll have this discussion again sometime in the future to see what's going on.
Yeah, I really appreciate you asking me to tell my story and also talk about some of the challenges that that I see, and I just really appreciate what you're doing for our industry, because many of the podcasts that you've provided to us, your audience, have been extremely valuable. I mean, and your approach, and again, it's just a resource that I find to be, because I'm already dialed into podcasts, it was a dream come true. I was really, really excited when I saw, and I just did it, in the podcast app on my iPhone, I just typed in pest control, I think, or pest, or lawn, and that's how I found you. Awesome. So I didn't exactly know that you were doing this. I found you organically through a random search on because I'm genuinely interested in continuing to do a better job at this, and also to get information from people about how to do it. And certainly, some of the things that you've talked about, including organic products and this and that, and has been extremely, it's really spiked my interest. So,
yeah, no, definitely. I'm planning to do a lot more on that, because I'm really starting to dive in very deeply into the biologicals and the natural stuff. We're really, the technology is getting better, and as it does, we're revisiting it constantly. So yeah, I'm really excited, and I'm excited about the the podcast is starting to take off. More and more people are listening to it every week. Facebook has definitely been a great help to us in reaching more people out there, and most of it is being found organically through iTunes, where we're getting the majority of our listeners. So yeah, man, I'm stoked. I'm excited. I'm really happy for you that, man, you're having such great success, because I know how hard it is to be out there and starting something new and launching. And it's extremely exciting to hear that you're making it and you're making a difference out there. So, man, thank you for being on, and I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks again. I really appreciate being a guest. All
right, man. Take care. Have a great one.
Thank you, Frank.
Bye-bye. Hey, I hope you guys really enjoyed this edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have questions and you want to leave a question on the air, or simply just contact us about the podcast, you can reach us at 707-395-7378. You can leave a recorded message 24/7 any day of the week. And you can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Look up Pest Geek Podcast. That's one word, Pest Geek Podcast, on Facebook and Twitter. And also, I want to give a special shout out to John Whitney Bird, who gave us a 5-star on Facebook. He wrote, "This is an intelligent, informative podcast that any pest professional should listen to." I thank you so much for that, John. And I really appreciate the comment and really appreciate you giving us that 5-star. John is the owner of Bird Pest Management in Peterson, California. So thanks for listening to the podcast. We really appreciate it. And also, if you want to see more about the podcast, you can go to pestgeekpodcast.com. There you can listen to all the content plus additional information that we put on that website. We're reviewing products and we're looking at different things that we can offer you on the podcast. Also, I want to start a new segment called the Tech Tip of the Week. And we're going to be featuring a little tech tip, whether it's a software or whether it's a piece of equipment or something that we can feature on the podcast. But my favorite out of all the tech tips that I have is called iPest. And iPest was put together by the University of Florida entomology people, and it's a great app for iPhone. It's $1.99, and they have 3 in this series for iPhone. It's not available. I tried to look for it for Android. It's not available for Android. But what it is 3 different apps that feature 3 different categories of insects. And there you can look up. It's a great training tool for new technicians that are out in the field and they come across an insect and they don't know what it is. They can just simply look it up through the pictures that they have. It gives them a background information on that pest, some biology. I also use it as a great tool for my customers. When I know what insect I'm dealing with and they don't know, I'll simply show them a picture of it on the phone, give them the data, and then tell them how we're going to solve that. So it's a great little tool, $1.99 for each one. There's 3 in the series. Check it out. It's called iPest. You can Google that and find it on iPhone or I think on the App Store. You can just look for iPest and you'll see it there. Hey, folks, it's been wonderful. It's been real fun to be here. I thank you for listening. And until next time, have a great one. Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.